Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be taking you through my first Olympic distance triathlon. I'm going to take you through my preparations and how everything went on race day. So first, let's do a bit of background. I'm currently training for a half Ironman, which is in August. But before that, I have two warm-up events in the calendar. The first of which is in June. That one has already happened, and that was a sprint triathlon. That one went really well, and I ended up finishing in 1 hour and 25 minutes. The second warm-up event, and the event that this video is about, is my first ever Olympic distance triathlon. Now this is a lot harder than the sprint distance triathlon and a massive step up for me. So the swim for the sprint distance triathlon was 400 meters, but for the Olympic distance it is 1,500 meters. And it's also not in a pool, it's in an open water lake, which is very new for me. The bike and the run are double the distance, 40 kilometers instead of 20 and 10 kilometers instead of 5. So coming into this, my main fear is definitely the swim. I've done quite a lot of pool swimming, but open water swimming is definitely something completely new to me. Luckily for me, the lake isn't too far from my house, so I decided to head down and check it out. I actually only did this yesterday and the race is tomorrow, so I definitely should have spent way more time prepping for open water swimming, but I never got around to it. So this was my first ever open water swim, and also the first swim I've ever done using a wetsuit. I bought 2 sizes of wetsuits just to be safe, from Decathlon, of course, my favorite shop. The water was super cold, but once I got going, I felt okay. I did 2 laps around this small course for a total of 600 meters, and that took me 16 minutes. This is a bit slower than I swim in the pool, but that's to be expected, I guess. Swimming in the open water is definitely very different to swimming in the pool. It's quite difficult to know where you're going because you always need to pop your head up above the water just to make sure you're going in the right direction, which definitely slows you down a bit. Anyway, that's enough about the swim. Let's talk about the bike. Since the previous triathlon, I've made a few changes. Previously, I had quite a messy front end. I had quite long cables and a very un-aero camera setup. For this race, I've shortened the cables and completely upgraded my front end. I've installed clip-on aero bars. These allow me to get much lower and therefore I can go faster for the same effort. I've also installed wireless blips onto my aero bars. This allows me to change gear while in the aero position, which on the UK roads is very useful. I've also mounted my camera to the inside of the aero bars, which I think is a bit neater and just a bit more convenient than how they were before. Given that the bike portion is 40 kilometers instead of 20 kilometers, getting low and aerodynamic and saving as many watts as possible is definitely the aim of the game here. All right, let's move on to the run. The run is 10 kilometers instead of 5 kilometers, which is double the distance, obviously. Pretty much everything is the same. I'm going to be using the same shoes as before. I did say I was going to change the speedy laces, but I never ended up changing them, so I'm just going to stick with regular ones. Not much to say about the run, really. All right, let's move on to nutrition. This is obviously a much longer race, which means I need to be a lot more careful about what nutrition I'm taking in. The first race was done in 1 hour and a half, which basically I could pretty much do on just a good breakfast, I think. But this one is probably going to be over 3 hours. And once you start getting into those long endurance distances, you really need to make sure your nutrition is correct, otherwise you can literally just run out of energy. So my plan here is to eat a good breakfast around 2 to 3 hours before the start time. Then before the swim starts, I'm going to pop a gel. This should be enough to get me through the swim. Onto the bike. So for the bike portion, I'm going to have 2 bottles. Each of these is going to be filled with SIS beta fuel powder. Each one of these contains 80 grams of carbs. So hopefully that should be enough to get me through the bike. Actually, on the bike, I want to be overfueled. That's because I don't really like taking gels while I'm running. So if I could have a bit of energy surplus before I go into the run, that will definitely be a good thing. On the run, I'm planning to take 1 gel with me, but I'm only going to eat it if I feel like I need the energy. Otherwise, I'll probably just leave it. Anyway, that's the nutrition done. So throughout this whole process of training for this Ironman, I've been working with Coach Costa from the NRC team. He's been guiding me through this whole process and has pretty much taken me from being a complete triathlon beginner to where I am now. So if you're interested in seeing what some personalized coaching can do for you, be sure to check out his website. The link is down below. So let's move on to some predictions about my final time. So let's do the swim first. In my practice open water swim, I did 600 meters in 16 minutes. You can extrapolate that pretty easily to 1500 meters in 40 minutes, which is a pace which I feel like I can hold for that whole time. My plan here is to enter the swim in the final group of swimmers because I know I'm a pretty slow swimmer and just try to stick with the group. Now moving on to the bike. This bit is quite interesting. In the previous triathlon, the bike portion was 20 kilometers long and I averaged 30.2 kilometers an hour with an average power of 230 watts. But in this race, the bike portion is 40 kilometers long and it comes after a swim which is almost 4 times as long. So to be honest, I don't think I'll be able to average that sort of wattage for this much longer time period, given that I'll already be really quite fatigued. However, I do now have the advantage of having a more aero position, given that now I have aero bars and I can get into a nice low tucked position. This could actually make me quite a bit faster. However, there are also 350 meters of climbing on the course, and being a pretty heavy guy at around 100 kilograms, any climbing whatsoever is always a bad sign for me. I also need to make sure my legs aren't completely cooked by the time I get onto the run portion. So I really want to come off the bike with a little bit of energy left in my legs. Otherwise, I will just completely bonk on the run. Given all of that, I don't think I'll be able to average 30 kilometers an hour for this 40 kilometer bike portion. So I'm thinking somewhere between 26 and 28 kilometers an hour would be pretty good. Really, my main goal here is just getting off the bike with something left in my legs. So with that in mind, a 26 kilometer an hour average would give me a time of around an hour and a half. All right, onto the run. So this is 10Ks, whereas my previous triathlon was 5Ks, so double the distance obviously. I'll be coming into this run with around 2 hours of exercise already in my legs, so my ambitions here aren't particularly lofty, so to speak. In the previous race, I did 5K in 25 minutes, a nice round pace of 5 minutes per kilometer, and if I were to do 10K with that same pace, it would take me 50 minutes, but we both know that's not gonna happen. If I manage to pace myself and save my legs, then I reckon I could do a pace of around 5.5 minutes per kilometer. But if I pace myself wrong and my legs are completely done, then I'll definitely be closer to 6, maybe 6.5 minutes per kilometer. So in terms of time, that gives me around 55 minutes if it goes well. If it goes badly, it could easily be over an hour. So let's add all these times together and see what we get as a final predicted time. So 40 minutes for the run, hour and a half for the bike, 55 minutes for the run, and then just add 5 minutes on for transitions, and that gives me an optimistic time of 3 hours and 10 minutes. So like I said, that is a very optimistic prediction, and if things don't go well, I could definitely end up being a lot slower than that. There's definitely a chance that I completely overdo it and just get to the run portion and my legs are completely done. That's the worst case scenario, and I would probably end up having to walk parts of the run course, which I definitely don't want to do. So with that in mind, wish me luck. The race is tomorrow and we will see how it goes. Right, so here we are, race day. This is the Gosfield Triathlon, and to be honest, it was a really, really good event. So thanks to everyone who volunteered to make it happen. Let's jump straight in, the swim. So this was self-seeded, so I decided to go in quite near the back because I knew I'd probably be one of the slowest swimmers. Getting into the water, you can see I was extremely graceful. The water wasn't as cold as it had been during the recon swim, so that was quite nice. I think it was about 21 degrees, but I still decided to go with my wetsuit. I settled into a nice rhythm to begin with, but open water swimming is definitely something I need to practice more. At one point I did end up swallowing a mouthful of water and ended up coughing quite a bit, but luckily the lake is so shallow that I can just stand up, and I just took a few seconds to compose myself. The swim ended up being pretty much as expected. The only issue was the sun. Because it was still quite early in the morning, it was angled really low in the sky, so swimming up the lake it was fine, but when you swim back down the sun was right in your eyes, so it was pretty hard to see where I was going. I am just using goggles which are perfectly see-through. For the next one I'm probably going to get some tinted goggles because it was really difficult to see anything at all. So because of that I just followed the people in front of me. I definitely wouldn't have known where I was going otherwise. So for the swim, I predicted myself a time of 40 minutes and I got that pretty much spot on. My actual time was 39 minutes and 33 seconds, so not too bad at all. The distance my watch recorded was 1,503 meters, which meant I'd gone in pretty much a perfect straight line. Right, into T1. I was one of the last people out the lake, so there weren't many people in the transition area with me. Taking off a wetsuit is horrible and very difficult to do gracefully. I managed to get everything done fairly quickly and headed out towards the bike portion, but somehow my number had managed to loosen itself from my race belt, but luckily the marshal helped me get it back on. Overall, T1 wasn't that fast at all. The wetsuit along with the number problems meant I spent a whopping 4 minutes there. Let's hope the bike leg will go smoother. So yeah, the bike didn't start well. Once I got on the bike, the first thing I noticed was that my power meter wasn't working. My bike computer wasn't reading the data it was sending, so I don't know what was going on there. I fiddled around with the settings as much as I dared to do whilst riding on the open roads, but I couldn't get it to connect. I had a power goal of around 200 to 230 watts, but now I didn't have that information and I would just have to ride on feel instead. I did still have my heart rate information, so I kind of knew how hard I was going. Coming out of the swim, I was so far back and I hoped that I could make up some time on the bike leg. That ended up being the case. I must have passed around 20 people, which was definitely a big confidence boost. The route was quite hilly and I feel like having the aero bars didn't really make that much difference. There were only a few parts of the course where it was straight enough to really settle into them. Most of the time was either climbing or going around corners, both of which I didn't feel confident doing in the aero bars. It was also a super windy day, which also slows you down while riding. Having to ride based on feel instead of riding to a power number was a bit weird initially, but once I accepted it and just sort of settled into the rhythm of it, I just rode within myself. Of course, I pushed going up the hills and then relaxed on the downhills. Before I knew it, the bike portion was over. Coming back into the transition area, there were quite a few people cheering on the roads, which is always quite nice. I was very surprised with my time. I'd set myself a speed goal of between 26 and 28 kilometers an hour. In the end, I finished the bike leg with an average speed of 29.2, which I was very, very happy with. This gave me a time of 1 hour and 23 minutes. This really surprised me because I felt like I was pushing quite hard, but I definitely left something in the legs for the run portion. On the bike, I drank about 90% of my carb water, so my fueling was going pretty well up to this point. Right, onto T2. This was a lot smoother than T1, nice and easy off the bike and straight into my running shoes. I made sure to really loosen my running shoes this time. Last time I didn't and it took me ages to put them on, but this time everything went well, straight onto the run in 1 minute and 37 seconds. Time for the final push. This is the last run, 10 kilometers on legs which have already gone through a lot of work. By this time it was around 11 AM and the sun was quite high in the sky and it was really heating up. Unfortunately, I haven't yet figured out the best way to get a camera out onto the run portion. I'm thinking of getting one of those little Insta360 cameras which you can attach to your cap, so maybe by the time I do the full half Ironman triathlon, I'll have one of those. Anyway, like I said, it was getting hot. The run course was 4 2.5 kilometer laps, and the first one was a real struggle. Obviously, coming off the bike, your legs are never going to feel good, but I did feel some sort of cramping in my quads, which isn't a good sign. Because of that, I really dialed it down in the first few kilometers. I was just taking it super easy just to make sure I didn't blow up. All I wanted to do was find a nice rhythm and hope my legs would come back to me. I had a gel and decided to take it within the first 5 minutes of the run. This was definitely the right decision because a few minutes after this, I started to feel much better, as if all the energy was coming back into my body. In the second lap, I was really starting to feel better, but the heat was definitely starting to get to me as well. Luckily, there was a water station on each lap and I took advantage of this. I think if I hadn't taken that water, I definitely would have really struggled. For the half Ironman, I definitely need to think of a proper way to carry my water on the run portion. Coming into the final lap, I had really settled into quite a nice pace. I felt like my legs were becoming stronger and stronger as the run went on. Into the final straight, and I managed to finish the run in a time of 52 minutes and 4 seconds. 3 minutes quicker than my best predicted time. Before the race, I'd set myself a goal of 3 hours and 10 minutes, and I ended up doing the whole triathlon in 3 hours and 30 seconds. I was actually quite gutted that I didn't get into the 2 hours. If I didn't have that issue with the race number, I think I would have managed it. Overall, I was super happy with this result. The actual race had a few issues, such as the power meter not working and getting my wetsuit off so slowly. But in terms of my fitness, I feel like I've definitely taken a step up. Since Since working with Coach Costa, my fitness has definitely got so much better. Let me put it into perspective. Before this event, my fastest ever 10K was 49 minutes and 40 seconds. And in this triathlon, I managed to run a time of 52 minutes. That's only about 2 minutes slower, and considering I'd already done 2 hours of exercise beforehand, I think it's a pretty impressive effort, and it really shows just how much better my fitness is now than it was before. Anyway, the next goal is of course the half Ironman, which will be coming up in August. Of course there'll be a video about that dropping soon, so if you want to see how I do in a half Ironman, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Alright, that's pretty much it for me. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.